Hello, and welcome to the Quest for Games. I'm Jerry, and in this video, we're going to do a how to play of the 2 to 4 player game, Reavers of Midgard by Gray Fox Games. In Reavers of Midgard, you're the captain of a longship trying to recruit other warriors so that you can gather resources, fight monsters, pillage castles and small towns, all in an effort to gain glory without gaining too much terror. The person who does this the best will have the most glory or victory points at the end of the game and will be praised in the halls of Valhalla. So I purchased this game. My videos are not sponsored. Any opinions you hear during this game or during the teach are mine and mine alone. If you like what I show here, I would appreciate it if you like. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. And with that said, let's get this to the table and start to teach. Hello, and welcome to the table. And let's start the setup. First thing we have to do in setup is to put the board out. And as you can see, this is a pretty big board and I'm losing parts of it off frame. We'll do some things to try to take care of that as we're going to each section. I'll need it out this big though, so you can see what all I'm doing during setup. So bear with that. Next thing, after we set the board up, the next thing we're supposed to do is pick first player. The normal first player token looks like this. If you have the Kickstarter, your first player token looks like this little mini. I'm going to set up for a 3-player game. So let's just say the person sitting over here is going to be the first player. Next thing we do is there's this round counter. And that counter has to go onto the 1 space on the Rosetta up here at the top of the board. Then we will need to sort all of our cards into their matching their backs, shuffle those cards, and place them in the spots that match their backs. This is a Sea Journey card, and it would go right here on the board. This is a Sea Monster cards, and they would go right here on the board. These, and that, you got to be careful with what you're looking at here. This is a keep, and you can see the little bit of a wall around it and the bigger like normal house in the middle. So the keep cards have to go over here. And again, we're matching the backs, right? We have these prosperity cards that have a little thing that looks like a tent on them. They go down here. And these are the ones, this is why I said it's, you got to be careful. This one is the town cards, and they look like they're smaller huts or town huts as opposed to the walled village of a keep. And those go down here. There's also the Reaver cards, and those go into a spot right here. You've got to take the conquered territory tiles. There's 3 different ones of those tiles, but you have to sort them by their color and then the number that's on them, and put them out in the colored and numbered spaces that match the number that's on the bottom and the color of the tile. There's a spot on the board for these ship upgrade tiles. This one happens to be the shield. There's one that's a treasure chest, or a chest. And there's some that are ships or hammers. Those are your ship upgrade tiles. We have to give each player a favor token, and these wooden favor tokens are what came with my Kickstarter. The basic game has that cardboard one. Then each player gets a ship that matches their color. If you're playing this, that's for a 3-player game. If you're playing this as a 2-player game, then you would give the 2 players 2 ships instead of 1 ship apiece. In the 3-player game, each person gets 1 ship, the ship of their color. And then There's this gray longship that goes to the first player, the player with the first player token. We also take each one of their victory tracking or honor tracking discs and put them on the 0 space. Each player is dealt 2 Reavers. And they will have to decide if they want to rally, specialize, or promote those. But we'll talk about that when we're talking about how the game plays. And it'll be the first thing that I do with those characters. Each player also gets a longship. We will have to create a supply of farms, walls, food, that's a 5 food, towers, and terror tokens. I happen to have this nice tray that came with the Kickstarter that has upgraded components. So I'm going to put that off to the side over here. So it's it's in reach of me. It's just off camera, sorry. You also have to set out a set of dice that's in reach of everyone. You have the black combat dice, and then you have different colored crew, the 3 different colored crew dice. I'm going to start to zoom into each area and talk about the setup and a little bit about how you play that area. So I'm blurring rules and setup here for a minute. Okay, so the final setup piece for the Reavers area is, you can see now maybe closer that there's a 4-player thing there. You'll set the Reavers up so that the cards go in this plus kind of pattern so that you can see the tops and the bottoms of the card. And you'll set each one of these up like that. So now let's talk about, so that's the finish of the setup. Let's talk about on a turn, what I do in this space, since I have it zoomed in here. If I put my player piece here and said, I'm going to go here, I get to take any one of these sets of 3, or I can take 2 off the top of the stack. As the first player, I also get 2 favor tokens. The second player can then take their turn and decide to do the same thing, but they don't get the favor tokens. The third player can also do the same thing, but again, they don't get favor tokens. And if we were playing 4 players, the 4th player could do that also. So on the first player's turn, all 3 players in this 3-player game are actually getting to do this action. It's just that since the first player went here first, they're the ones who get this 2 honor. Kind of going back to setup a little bit, this player got these 2 cards from their first 2 cards that they drew. Okay, so let's talk about what the Reaver cards are. This dice here is the dice you get from when you collect that. So when this first player got these 2 cards, they should have collected, because this one's got a red and a blue, and this one's got a blue. They should have collected 2 blue and 1 red dice. They should have rolled those dice, leaving those faces face up. They should put those on their boat. So the specialization down here is it's the bottom of the card here. And in this particular case, this card says I could discard any blue dice to gain a blue dice of whatever facing that I want it to be. And now if I'm going to specialize this card, which let's just say that's what I'm doing, I would take them and put them, where do I want them to be? I would have to think about where I want them to go, but let's just say I want them in under raiding keeps. They would go in like this, where you can still see their ability, their specialization. So whenever I raid keeps, or whenever I am raiding a keep, I can trade a blue dice in and change it to whatever face I want it to be. And this one we promoted. So when we promoted them, they're going into this spot as a leader, because I promoted them. Blue leaders get 4 food. So now first player gets 4 food for that. If it happened to be a red Reaver that we promoted, you could either get a keep or a village card from for the red. And if it was a yellow, you get 2 favor tokens. The other thing that we need to know is, and it was good that I promoted this blue, this bird symbol now, because it's a blue clan leader, you can see at the top of your board here, the blue clan leader, that is now any dice that I want it to be. So let's just say for my turn, the first player picked these 2 cards. So they would get 2 red and a blue dice for picking those 2 cards. They would roll those, and they would have to place those onto their board with whatever face was up. And now you can see I have 2 blue birds. So those are 2 wild dice. And now I get to decide, do I want to promote them to be my leader? Do I want to rally them? Or do I want to specialize them? Well, for now, let's just say I'm going to rally this blue warrior here. So I will get 2 more blue dice for rallying them. Roll those 2 dice, put those on my ship. So I now have those 2 new dice on my ship. And this blue warrior goes face down in my area. I don't lose them. They just go face down in my area by my player board. This red one, I'm deciding I'm going to specialize the red one. The red one says this specialization is I can discard any 2 dice because they're white. I can discard any 2 dice while I'm taking this action, and I get a wall segment for that. I'm going to specialize this one. I could put it under village here, but I'm going to put it under the keeps, because the keeps is where I would normally get walls. So that's what we can do for the Reavers space. So now that the blue player took their turn, I'm not going to go through everything that the other players would do, but their options are player 2 could take 2 of these cards, 1 set of 2, and they'll take this set. Now, nothing gets replaced. And let's say player 3 decided, I don't want any blue warriors. I'm really looking for red. So they could actually draw 2 cards off the top of the deck, and they luckily got at least 1 red. So they would have to go through the same thing. Do they want to rally? Do they want to specialize? Or do they want to promote and set up their board appropriately? They would also get the dice from the top of the card. They would get those dice. After everybody's taken their turn, you will then go and deal out a new set of Reaver cards. And one other thing I need to mention while we're doing this, if my longship ever runs out of space, I have 2 more places for dice right here. If my longship ever runs out of space for dice, if I would get more dice in, I have to decide, do I want to keep the new dice that I just rolled and put them on my board and discard something off of my board? Or do I want to discard the new ones that I just got? Okay, so we've now moved over to the subdue territory spot on the board. And we'll talk about what that is. I have the player board here, so you can see what happens on the player board at the same time as what we're doing when we're subduing the territories. This player has decided they're going to go subdue territories. So in subduing territories, since they're the first player, they get to do this 3 times. They get to try to subdue a territory 3 times. The second player, so the person to their left, would get to do it twice. The third player would get to do it once. We don't have a 4th player, but if we had a 4th player, they'd get to try to do it 1 time too. There's a variable cost to what it's going to cost you to subdue a territory. So there's 2 things that you can do to subdue a territory. You can either peacefully subdue them or bribe them by paying the 1 food here, or you can forcibly subdue them by the 1 shield. That's their defense, is 1. And each one of these tiles has something a little bit different. Give up 1 dice or 1 defense, or 3 dice and 3 defense, a favor token or 1 defense, those kind of things, okay? Since we're in subdue territories, they have a specialized person in subdue territories. They can spend 1 favor token, putting that back into the supply, and they get 2 honor for that, or 2 victory points. So you can't see it, but I would move them 2 on this victory point track. They have 2, well, they have 1 food. They get to do this 3 times. So they have 1 food. They're going to spend the 1 food, and they're going to take this 1. On the back side of that tile, it says they get a yellow dice and they get 2 more honor. And this chip will sit next to their board, their player board, because when we do cleanup, they'll get victory points for that too. So they'll keep this next to their player board, but based on that, they will get a yellow dice and 2 victory points when all the subdued territories is done. They collect that at the end. So this yellow dice couldn't be used while they're still subduing. The next thing they can do is, let's say they're going to spend their 2 favor tokens, and they'll take the 2 from here, which that lets them take a prosperity and a town card at their end of their turn. Now they have no more resources to spend to do this in a peaceful way. So let's talk about what they would have to do if they were trying to combat or do this in the combat or forcible way. Well, a couple of things. These 2 can be turned into 1 hammer if they want them to be. And that's a 2 hammer. So when I'm doing combat, I look at how many hammers I have. And depending upon how many hammers I want to use, I can replace those with these black combat dice. So I at least get 2 for this one if I'm going to give up that dice. And let's say, which one do I want to go after? Now, what the heck? Let's go after a 3 in the purple. So I'm going to discard both of these 2, which will give me 2 more black dice. So now I have a total of the 4 black dice because of the dice that I gave up here. And that's why some of these type of things are good. I don't have it in subdue. I have it in battle at sea, but I could have sacrificed this yellow dice and gotten a double hammer yellow dice instead to get more combat dice. But this is what I have. I have to get at least 3 axes on this roll. I got 4 axes. So because I got the 4 axes, I get to take this. And that would have been that was my 3rd attempt. Just for explanation purposes, this player got this one, and they would have gotten a wall and 2 food at the end of their turn, which is the end of their turn right now. If they wouldn't have made that, that was it. They're done. They can't do any more. If they would have decided to do the combat first and they failed at the combat, and let's say instead of going for 3, I went for 2, and I didn't successfully complete the 2 the first time, I could spend more dice and try it again, but that would count as my 2nd attempt. So each combat counts as 1 attempt, failed or successful. They would get all the resources that are shown on these tiles. The other thing that we have to remember is during cleanup, each one of these tiles that they have is worth 1 victory point or 1 glory. So they're going to get 3 each round, and we're on round 1. So when we go from round 1 to round 2, they're going to get those 3 victory points. When we go from 2 to 3, they're going to get the 3 again. So they will continue to get 3 victory points or more, depending upon how much territory they have each round. Okay, so we're moving on to the battles at sea area. To finish setup for the battles at sea, we would be flipping over cards from the battles at sea until we fill this track up. But this is only for 4 players, and I'm setting up a 3-player game, not a 4-player. So I only put out these 3. I am going to have, this is the player board that I've got so that you can kind of follow what I'm doing with the player board. So the first thing we have to do, this player's decided they're going to go on their turn. battles at sea. For battles at sea, you have to pay 4 food to be able to do the battle at sea. So this is a big food. So this is, I turn that back in and I get 1 regular food. So I paid my 4 food. I will get 2 glory because the purple player gets 2 glory for being the person that goes in here first. Nobody else gets any glory after that, but everybody will have a chance to pay their 4 food and to do the battles at sea. So at the battle at sea, the first thing we have to do is pick a blue journey card. So we pick the blue journey card, and this one happens to be all clear, so nothing happens. It's possible that we could have picked something else like this one here, which is you have a choice of either paying that 1 hammer dice or discarding 1 dice of the same color as your leader. And this leader's blue, so we would have to discard 1 blue, any one of the blue dice. But we got an all clear. Now we have a choice of trying to go into combat. So let's go look at one of these cards. Let's go look at this one because it's a little bit more complicated. So this monster card, you have to discard 2 ships, a hammer, a blue, the bird or the blue leader symbol, the helmet, which is the red leader symbol, or do 5 combat to them. You get 19 victory and 1 favor token for winning. So that's our choice right now. For any one of these that are out here, we can choose to use the dice that it specifically states. I'll do this combat. I'll do this both ways. I could, for this one that's worth 19 here, I don't have 2 ships, but I have 1 ship, and I have this leader symbol, so I can put that out there. I have 1 hammer, and I have both of the 2 leader symbols. So I have the dice necessary to be able to beat this by just discarding those 5 dice. So that's one way we could do it, and I would get the 19 victory points. Let's just show how the combat would work, though, which is the same as the way the combat worked in the subdued territory. But so I have 2 hammers here. That's all I have is 2 hammers. But I have this one specialization that says I can discard a blue dice and get a blue dice with a facing of any facing I want. So let's say the blue dice only has 1 hammer available. So let's say I'm resetting that to 1 hammer. Now I have 3 hammers. So I have those 3 hammers. I can turn these 3 hammers in to get 3 combat dice. With 3 combat dice, I technically could get the 5. I could get the 4, or I could do the 3. I have 3 favor tokens here. I'm going to go for the 4. So I'm going to roll my dice, and I got 3, but I have 1 blank here. I'm going to spend 1 of my favor tokens to be allowed to re-roll a dice. So I'm going to re-roll this dice. And now I have 5. So I beat this, and I would get to remove 1 terror, and I'd get 12 victory points. If I didn't win, then all that would happen was I sacrificed the 3 dice and the 4 food, and I basically got nothing for it. There's no other penalty. So that's battles at sea. Okay, we're moving on or down to the trade with villages square. To finish the setup of the trade with villagers, you have to roll 2 dice of each color and set those dice on the spaces marked. And then you deal out 3 prosperity cards. The prosperity cards are kind of a mission card or something along those lines. In this particular case, you get 1 extra glory for each wall, or 1 extra glory for each treasure, or in this case, 1 extra glory for each blue Reaver that you've rallied. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about here, and I'll take this opportunity, is if you remember, we gave this gray ship to the blue player or the first player. The blue player or the first player went to the Reavers. The yellow player went to the subdue territory. The purple player went to the battles at sea. For the fourth and last thing that's happened this round, we have the blue player using the gray ship go to trade with villages. As you'll see here, this little black part of the square, it costs nothing to do this. And as the first player, you get to pick 3 things that you want to do here. And then the second player gets to pick 2, and the third player 1, and the fourth player 1 thing that they want to do here. So as the person who put this ship down and the person who has the first player token decides that they're going to pick up this prosperity card, they can pick either 2 favor, 3 food, 2 dice from this set of dice, or a prosperity card. So they're picking the prosperity card. And then they're going to pick this double hammer and the blue leader dice. And for their, that's 2. And for their last choice, they'll take 3 food. So those were their 3 choices. The last thing that they have to do after they've chosen their 3 rewards for being in this spot, they have to pass the first player token to the player to their left, or pass it clockwise. So they are no longer first player. They will lose this gray ship. This gray ship will go to another player. The second player gets to choose 2 things. They could choose from these dice, but we don't replay the dice. They could choose their prosperities, but we don't put a new prosperity out here. They can just choose from what's out here. If the second player, let's say, chose this for 1 and this for 2, when the third player came in, that's all they get to choose from. Or they can take resources. If the third player decided to take this prosperity, then the fourth player has no prosperity to choose from, which we don't have a fourth player in this game, but fourth player wouldn't have anything. They could take these 2 dice, or they could take a random prosperity from the top of the deck. But since those are not out there, they'd have to take a random one from the top of the deck. Okay, so that's trading with villagers. After we do the 4 rounds, so we would have to go to cleanup. And in cleanup, what would happen is this token would be passed to the next player to their left in clockwise order, even though the first player was passed to, they would also lose this. If they hadn't lost the first player, they would still lose this. It would still be passed to the next player in a clockwise order. You would get 1 glory for each one of the territories that you own. We would clear the dice from here and get a new set out. And we would remove any remaining face-up cards on the board and replace them with new cards. Okay, we're now moving on to raid villages. So for the raid villages, to finish the setup, I had to take a card from here and deal it into each one of these spots. We didn't deal any cards into these spots because we've got a 3-player game, not a 4, so these do not get anything in them. As the player, I'm going to put my ship here on the raid villages spot and say I'm going to take that for my turn. The cost in this black box is 1 food and 2 treasure tokens. Well, I don't have any treasure tokens, but I have a blue leader, and I do have 2 of the blue leader symbols on my dice, and this tells me that I can trade that for to be a treasure chest. So I'll take these 2 dice plus my food and trade that in, and now I get to pick 2 cards. For going here, being first player to go here, I get to pick 2 cards from the top of the deck. Nope. And then I'm going to be able to pick my 2 cards because for paying the resources. So I'm going to take these 2 cards. So let's talk a little bit about what each one of these different kind of cards mean. So this one, the village wall, I automatically get 2 favor tokens because of the village wall. I can decide that I want to continue and take another favor token, a wall token, but then I have to take a fear token if I decide that I want to do that. So that's what that little slash in there means, is that I get these 2 favor tokens for free. If I want to, I can take these, but I have to take the fear token for doing that. And walls are worth something at the end of the game. So, okay, so this card is called an artifact card, and I can store a ship dice on here. At end game scoring, it's going to be worth 1 victory point. The ship dice that I store on here, when I go to trade with villagers, I can discard that ship dice and get 2 dice from the trade area. Even if I decide not to partake in the trading, if I rest or skip, I can still get the 2 dice. So these artifact cards get slid into the side of the board, sort of like that. And you can take a dice and store it there. But now this ship dice isn't a ship dice really anymore. I would turn this ship dice in when I go to trade and get the 2 free dice. So then the next one that I have here is a war dice, or a war card, Axes and Spears. So with the Axes and Spears, I would automatically get 1 red and 1 blue dice from that card. I would have to roll them and then put them on my board. And then I could take, or I don't take the dice. It's a slash, so it's not an and, it's an or. Unlike this one where it's a line and I can go past the line and do more. This one's an or. I could either take the 2 dice, or I could take 5 glory and have to take 1 terror. And then the last card I have here is one that says I can get an upgrade for my ship. So I could take this treasure chest upgrade and slot it into one of my spots on my ship, or I could take 3 glory. What this treasure chest will do on my ship is once per round, I can use it as in replace of a dice that has a treasure chest on it, and just flip it over, and now it's on its gray side. And then when we do cleanup, I flip it back over, and I can get basically a free treasure chest dice. There are upgrades for shield dice, and there's an upgrade for a ship and a hammer dice. And they all do the same thing. When you get the upgrade, you can flip it over and you've used it. There's one more type of card that I should talk about that's in this deck, and that is these runic carvings. For the runic carvings, you can discard 1 terror, and then you have to give somebody else gets a terror, or you can take 10 victory points and 2 terror. But this is one way you can get rid of terror tokens. And I believe that's all for raiding villages. So now let's talk about the last space, the raiding keeps. To finish the setup for the raiding keeps, just like any of the other ones, we have to set out pairs of cards. So that's the finish of this. So that's the finish of the setup for that. Now, to come here, if a player is going to put their ship on this spot and say I'm coming here, I have to pay 2 food and 2 shield dice. Any player that wants to partake in this action of doing this has to pay the 2 dice and the 2 food, because it's the black space up in here. And you can take 1 pair of these for spending that. As the first player, again, the first player takes 2 cards off the top at random. The second player would take 1 card off the top at random and still get a pair. The third player wouldn't get any cards off the top, they just get the pair. We aren't playing a 4-player game. If we were, these 2 would be filled in. As the player, they choose which one of these pairs of cards that they want to take They have a tapestry and they have this tower card is what they just drew. These are two different tapestries, so they'll take these two. And now let's start talking about the cards themselves. So based on these cards, so they would get a blue and yellow dice. They'd have to roll that blue and yellow dice and then put those dice in their ship, in their long ship. They could, if they chose to pillage the tower, they could decide to do that. And they would need 3 combat, and they would get 5 glory and 1 tower. Let's say they're going to do that. And combat works the same way, right? I get 2 dice for this double hammer. And because I'm a blue, I will take these 2 and get 2 more combat dice. So now I've got 4 combat dice. I've given up these dice to do that. I've given up these 2 dice also. So now I roll my combat, and I've gotten 5, which is well more than what I need for that. So I would get a tower, and I would get 3 glory right away. So I'd move my glory up on the victory track right away for 3, and then I would take the tower. So let's talk a little bit about these. These are 3 different tapestries. So you can see if you have 3 unequal tapestries, then it's worth, for 1, it's worth 2. For 2 unequal, it's worth 4. If you have 3 unequal, it's worth 15 victory points at the end of the game. So these 3 I'm going to hold on to until the end of the game. This keep wall is basically the same thing as the tower one that I just did. And it works the same way. I'd get 2 favor, and I'd have to do a combat of 2 to get another favor and a wall, if that's what I wanted, if that's the one I chose. The armor here is you get victory points based on how many armor you have. So for 1, I only get 1, but if I had 6, I would get 30 victory points. Now, if I have 7, I have 30 victory points for the 1 set of 6 plus 1 more for the 7th. You start over once you get past that. And this treasure works basically the same way. It's 2 victory points for each treasure card and 16 victory points if you have 4 treasure cards. If you have 5 treasure cards, then you have 16, and then you have 2, so you get 18 victory points at the end of the game. So these are all things that happen at the end of the game. Like the other decks, the 3rd player comes along, and let's say the 2nd player had taken this one, and the 3rd player went and looked and said, I don't want that. They could take 2 blinds from the top up here. The 2nd player could take 2 blinds from the top. If they didn't see anything out here they liked, they could take 2 blind. But they're still paying their cost, the 2 food and the 2 dice. So that's it for raiding keeps. You keep doing that each round around. Each person takes an action with their ship, and then the gray ship person gets to take the gray ship's action. During cleanup, you will remove all the cards and reset up these dice, and put out new cards, and you'll get 1 victory point for each territory token that you have. And you will move that right away on the victory point tracker. You won't wait. Those aren't things that happen at end game scoring. You're moving those at the end of each round. That way, if you got 3 at the first round, you'll wind up getting, what, about 15 at least for those 3, plus whatever else you get. During cleanup, you're passing this around. Even if the first player moves, this ship is passed around. What the first player token allows you to do is you get to put your ship out first. But the gray ship for a 3-player game gets passed around for each round, right? So you do that for all 6 rounds till you get done with the 6th round. And when you're done with the 6th round, you go into final scoring. So after the final round, let's just say this is what this player had. And let's go through and try to figure out how we would score it. So they have 2 terror tokens. For 2 terror tokens, it's -3 glory. So we're going to move their glory back 3. 1, 2, 3. They have an artifact that's worth 1, so we'll move them forward 1 for that artifact. We're going to go into the keep cards now. We got to sort them by types. So there's they have 2 armory cards here. And for 2 armory cards, that's 2 victory points. So 1, 2. They have 2 art cards. And for the 2 art cards, that's 6 victory points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have 3 different tapestries, 3 unequal tapestries. So that's 15 points. They have 2 treasures, so that's 4 points. So they have 2 farms. If they had the most farms, they would get 3 victory points for having the most, but they have 2, so we're going to say that's not the most. And for 1 to 3 farms, they're worth a glory apiece, so that's 2 glory for those 2. So they have 3 walls, so let's say that's the most that anybody had. They get an additional 4 glory for that, for having the most, plus they get 3 for this, so they're going to get 7 for the walls. And they have 2 towers, and I'm not going to say they had the most towers. So for 2 towers, that's 3 apiece, so there's 6 for that. If people were tied for having the most, like somebody else had 3 wall segments, they would get the same additional 4 victory points. So for the tiles, the territory tiles that they have, there's no additional victory points for those. They should have gotten this 2 victory points and the card, the Reaver card, and they should have gotten these 2 in the dice when they got the rewards for their tiles. So there shouldn't be any for that. So they have a couple of prophecy cards here. This first one here says they get 1 glory per blue Reaver card they have. So there's 1 blue, 2, 3, 4 blue cards. So they get 4 more glory for that. Then they have this one, Feast for the Gods. They get 1 victory point for each of the food type territories they have. So 1, 2. So they get 2 more victory points for that. 1 victory point for each wall segment. They got 3 wall segments, 1, 2, 3 victory points for that. And then 1 victory point for each treasure card. And they had 2 treasure cards, so they get 2 more victory points for that. And they wound up with 117 glory. Actually, that's a little low of a score, so my contrived game didn't really give them the victory points they should have, but that's how you go through and do the victory points. The person with the most victory points is the winner. If there is a tie for victory points, the person with the most favor tokens is the winner. And if there's still a tie, then it's a tied victory. So that's all for the teach. Let's go on to final thoughts. Okay, final thoughts for Reavers of Midgard. I hope you can see during the teach, one of the things that I think is very good about Reavers of Midgard is that there is no real downtime for players during their turn. When you pick the thing as the player whose turn it is, when you pick the action you want to take, everybody else can take that action. I won't say this is the first game that did that because I've got a couple of other games that do that, but I do like that mechanic in a game that makes it so that there isn't really any downtime. Everybody's reacting to what you're doing. So I see that as a positive. It isn't truly a worker placement. You're picking what action you want to take, and you're only picking the one. Unless you're playing a 2-player game, then you pick 2. But so I wouldn't call it a worker placement, but you are collecting resources. You are still doing battles at sea. So It has some dice rolling, which I like. It has set collecting, which I like. Cons for the game. I'm not really sure I have a con for the game. It is a little bit difficult to get started at times. You don't have enough resources to do some of the actions, so when somebody else is taking their turn, you really can't do anything on their turn because you don't have enough resources to do much. But that changes really quickly as you start to play through. My rating for this game, I would put it at a 9. It is my favorite of the Midgard series. I do like it so much that I kickstarted a Reavers of Midgard, the card game, hoping to get something that didn't take up as much table that I could take with me on trips and stuff. That didn't really pan out. There's parts of that game that you're still doing the set collecting, and the town and the village pieces are kind of still in there. The wall segments and that are still kind of in there, but there's not the same kind of sea battles or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure that the card game replaces this. For me, it doesn't replace this. Is this game for you? Well, if you like the mechanic of, while the other person picks what they want to do, I can tag along and do the same thing that they're doing. But at the same time, that causes me some problems because if they do it before I do, they get better bonuses for doing it. I think this is a very good implementation of that kind of a mechanic. If you like set collection and a little bit of battling out there with the right dice resources in that, again, I think this game might be for you. If you don't like the dice rolling and you don't like the randomness of dice rolling, you don't like tagging along behind somebody else and them getting more than you do, then maybe this game isn't really for you. It's not a head-to-head battler. It's more of a Euro. So, you are going after victory points. So there really isn't anything that I'm doing that's impacting the other players that I'm playing against, except for I chose that spot first. And so I get more resources because I chose that spot first. So if you really want something that you're battling each other, this is a Euro. It's not really for you, probably. Build quality. Mine's a Kickstarter, so your build quality is going to be different if you buy the retail edition. These wooden pieces that I've been using to play with, they're cardboard tokens in the base game. My player boards have notches in them to fit the dice in, and I've seen the retail version of this, and it doesn't have the little two-layer board with the nice notches for the dice. But my build quality for the one that I have is really good. And they did come with the retail pieces. So I think, again, it's a normal Champions of Midgard, Gray Fox kind of a build quality. I think it's good. The card stock, for a lot of the cards, it's the smaller cards. So if you're looking for card sleeves, you're going to have to find small card sleeves and the big card sleeves. But all in all, I think it's a really good build quality. I haven't had any problems with it. All right, that's the end of my final thoughts on Reavers of Midgard. I hope you have fun with this game. I have. I hope you have fun playing games, and I'll see you next time. Bye.